Hello and welcome to the Fifth Down Huddle. This is episode 9 of the off season, Tuesday, May 26th. And there has been some interesting new news in the NFL. The new NFL diversity plan. It's a new rule that the NFL just put into place, and it basically requires all teams to interview at least 2 minority head coach candidates when they have a vacancy. Now, to me, this rule doesn't really do much to solve the problem the NFL is focusing on here. Think about it. What does this truly force teams to change? Now, simply having them interview a minority will not change whether or not a racist organization hires one. I mean, think about it. If the organization is racist, or whoever is in charge of the process of choosing a new head coach is racist, or has something against African Americans, or has something against Mexican Americans, then why would interviewing one change their viewpoint? Now, I believe that if the NFL is to do anything here, they should do something that practically forces NFL teams to make a minority hire, because that seems to be their goal. This new rule won't bring the racial divide in the NFL anywhere closer to being sealed off. Like I said, the rule almost seems like window washing, in the way that at a first glance it seems to help solve a big issue, but in reality, it doesn't do much to solve it at all. It's like this: if the NFL were trying to solve an excess of star players holding out due to contract disagreement, something that would severely hurt their viewership. I mean, think about it. If Dak Prescott, Aaron Rodgers, Patrick Mahomes, players like that were holding out in contracts, the NFL would be genuinely worried, because that takes away a lot of viewers. A lot of viewers come to watch players like that. So, if they were holding out and something like that did threaten the NFL, one in the NFL might come up with the idea of adding some sort of incentive or some sort of rule change or some sort of change within the NFL that would pretty much force these players to play their games. But that's the thing. In the NFL's eyes, not having a fair number of minority head coaches doesn't affect their income. Ticket sales, food sales, viewers on TV, all the things that the NFL profits from are not affected by the ethnicities of the head coach. So the NFL, instead of truly finding a way to fix this problem, finds a way to shut people up who are genuinely wanting change. The NFL isn't solving anything here. They're just making themselves look better in the eyes of those who want this change, who want the NFL to be more fair and more diverse. Like I said, it's just window washing. They're just making it so that the people who are genuinely worried have an excuse to say, hey, we did something. But what really are they doing? What really are they changing? What really are they doing to make sure that these teams change the way they hire head coaches? It doesn't seem right. And it doesn't seem useful at all. Now, looking at the minority head coaching hires in recent years, since 2002, an average of 18.7% of all head coaching hires have been minorities. Now, in 2014, roughly 33.7% of the U.S. population were non-white, or of a minority group. So, if you put 2 and 2 together, statistically, and I single out statistically because there's other factors that go into choosing a head coach, that if it were just based on race, 33.7% of all NFL head coaching hires since 2002 should theoretically be minorities. But instead, the number stands at roughly 18.7%. It's about a 16 percentage point difference. Now, that's not a terrible percentage to have. I'd be much more concerned if it was around 10%, even lower than that, which almost seems like a possibility in today's world. But that's not a terrible number to have. Considering there's only 32 NFL head coaches in the league, that's not a terrible number to have. 32 head coaches, there's not really a lot of room for a perfect percentage point there. If there were 100 head coaches, yeah, I'd expect around 30 of them to be minorities, but there's only 32. So that number has a lot of leeway there in terms of what's bad and what's good. Now, something interesting to look at, which I noticed listening to some other people's take on the subject, is the reasoning teams have already to choose minority head coaches today. Something to look at is the cultural bonds that players can form with their coaches, which can be seen in many different ways. A minority player can gain a lot from having a coach of the same ethnicity connect with when it comes to personal issues. Now, is it necessarily racist to want this? No, not at all. Across different cultures, players and even just normal people struggle with different things within their family traditions or their neighborhood, or even just between their friends. And it can definitely always help to have a minority head coach to talk to, or just a minority leader, or someone to talk to that can connect with what it is you are going through, or who can better understand it even if they haven't experienced it. But overall, back to the main point, the NFL is not doing the best that they can do here. And it's clear to see why. I said it once and I'll say it again. In the NFL's eyes, not having a fair number of minority head coaches doesn't affect their income. It doesn't affect them that much at all. Besides people simply asking for the change, but in the end, the majority of NFL fans aren't very fixated on that. They really aren't. Outside of the NFL, outside of their common viewers, there are a lot of people who definitely want that change. But I think that the problem is there isn't a very large focus on it. There isn't a large force that's pushing them to do the best that they can do, that's pushing them to do the right thing, like a boycott or something along those lines that would truly force them to make a change. Because if we really want something to change within the NFL in terms of diversity and racism, you have to force it. Simply showing the front offices that make these decisions based on race, that, hey, we're going to show you this person, hopefully it makes you less racist, that doesn't work. It doesn't make much sense at all. Because if they're already racist, how is just showing them someone of minority descent or ethnicity going to change anything? If they didn't bring them in the first place, then they truly aren't interested in them. As, if you're hiring someone for a job, you're truly only interested in hiring the people that you bring in to look at. But if the NFL forces you to bring in more people, or if your business forces you, or your corporation, say corporate forces you to bring in more people, a list of people that they give you to bring in to go ahead and choose from, compared to the people you chose to bring in, you're more likely than not, 9 times out of 10, going to choose from the list of people you brought in. And, it's sad to see that the NFL isn't doing everything that they could do to change this very visible problem in the NFL. Again, by the percentage point, it's not a terrible problem, but it's a visible problem that they can fix. And they're not doing everything that they can to fix it. And I think it's simply a problem of they don't have any pressure forcing them to. They just don't. And without that pressure, the NFL will not change it. Another interesting question, and something that a lot of people have been talking about recently, is whether or not the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are last year's Browns. We all remember a time when the Browns had a solid young quarterback in Baker Mayfield. They had Odell Beckham, Jarvis Landry, Nick Chubb, Njoku, more. All this talent, and yet the results never came. And a new head coach, who was the offensive coordinator a year before. So their 2019 season even began with an over 30-point blowout loss to the Ravens, and we all know where the season went from there. They didn't make the playoffs. So are the Buccaneers this year's Browns? I don't think so, and here's why. Point number 1, the Brady experience compared to the Baker experience. Brady is the most experienced quarterback in the NFL right now. Baker Mayfield, at the time, was not very experienced at all. He had 1 year under his belt with one head coach. He was not experienced at all. But Brady is. Brady, I'm trying to explain this in a good way. Experience goes such a long way. One, it helps you to be a much better leader. When Baker is trying to be a leader as a young quarterback, I'm sure he did great at it, but it's really hard to be a leader when you're kind of new to the game. And Beckham had been in the league for a few years more than Baker, same as Landry, same as Chubb. So Brady has the experience. He has worked with several offensive coordinator coaches. He's been with the same head coach his entire NFL career, so it'll be interesting to see how he works with Bruce Arians. But something interesting also is the fact that Bruce Arians, it kind of leaked out that Bruce Arians is ready to give Brady a lot of control of that offense. So that's definitely something interesting to keep an eye on. As Baker's young, he wasn't very experienced in the NFL, wasn't super developed, and had all of a sudden had all this pressure on him to be amazing. It didn't pan out. Now let's look to the next point. Brady with and without weapons. We never really saw Baker with a terrible team. With the Browns in his first year, they weren't great, but they weren't terrible. They had some good weapons. They had some decent talent. But Brady, we have seen him on a really bad team. Or at least a really bad offense. This season, he had a really bad offense. Really just, I don't know how many receivers they went throughout the season, but Antonio Brown had his little jiffy in there. Demaryius Thomas was almost on the final roster. They went through receiver after receiver. Gordon was put on injury reserve at the end of the season and ultimately released. Edelman was battling injuries the majority of the year. They got Mohamed Sanu mid-season. N'Keal Harry was injured for the majority of the season. There's just so many factors that caused that offense to be really bad. Their starting center was out for the year. The left tackle position was terrible all year, or the majority of it. Once Isaiah Wynn came off injury reserve, it got a little better. But overall, the team was not good. They lost Gronk as well in the offseason. They lost James Devlin, a big part of their run game. So like I said, overall, the offense was not very good. And yet the Patriots made the playoffs. A big part of that was their strong defense, granted. But the thing to look at is the numbers that Brady had, even with such a terrible offense. He had pretty good numbers. He did not play that badly at all. He had much better numbers than you would expect from a quarterback like Baker, given that type of offense. So, seeing Brady with weapons that are arguably comparable to the 16-0 season, now granted he doesn't have that many weapons, but they're really, really good weapons. He has Chris Godwin, who's a really good receiver, arguably going to have 1,000 yards this year. He could easily have 2,000-yard receivers this year. Mike Evans, who's already an established player, he's a great deep threat. Brady hasn't had that in a few years. Rob Gronkowski, who people are arguing is washed, but I think he's going to be at his best. The last season he was in the NFL, he missed several games to injury, and seasons prior he also missed several games to injury, so it's going to be amazing to see Gronkowski fully healthy. A year of rest. We're going to get to see Gronk at peak health. That's going to be scary. They have a young running back who arguably could turn into something pretty solid. I don't think he's going to be a star, but they have an alright offensive line. The Buccaneers are a solid team, and they have some great offensive weapons. Also, O.J. Howard, can't forget about him. They've got great offensive weapons, and I think Brady's going to be able to utilize those very, very well. O.J. Howard, Rob Gronkowski, Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, just thinking about it just scares other NFC coaches. I'm sure of it. So Brady with weapons is going to be very fun to see. We haven't seen it in a while. We haven't seen a Patriots team that has had a ton of weapons for Brady. I remember looking back, you can remember the season where he had Gronk and Edelman, and that offensive season before the Rams, and it was a really good year. So he's had relatively good offense, but I don't think he's had an offense quite as good as the Buccaneers for quite a few years. Now, defensively for the Buccaneers, are also a solid team. A lot of people get the idea wrong about the Buccaneers defense. A statistic they often look to is points allowed. Yes, it was bad, but you also have to look at why it was bad. Why did they allow so many points? I don't think they're a top-tier offense, or defense, but I do think they're a pretty average, pretty good defense. They're not terrible, they're not great, but they're good. They'll keep the other team around 20 points, and they'll keep a great offense where you'd expect a great offense to be. And I think Brady can work with that. When you look at why they let up so many points defensively, it's because of Jameis Winston, or at least a big part of it was. When you throw so many interceptions, it becomes very hard for your defense to defend. The other team's constantly getting great field position. I mean, what do you expect? And then the third point is coaching. Baker Mayfield on the 2019 Browns had Freddie Kitchens as the head coach. He was an offensive coordinator the year before, not experienced as a head coach, but they threw him in, and he failed. He failed drastically. It was a really, really bad coaching season for him, and it was obvious Baker didn't love the coach. It was obvious the relationship didn't work out. But Bruce Arians is an established head coach. Bruce Arians has experience, and like I said earlier, Bruce Arians is ready to give Brady some control of the offense, almost like Brady is an acting offensive coordinator. So then you look at the last point. The Bucs team has been together for a while outside of Brady. It's really the same team that we saw last year with one new player. The Browns got a lot of talent added to the team. The Bucs, one new guy, Tom Brady, as well as Gronk, but the point is that there is already chemistry there, not only between Brady and Gronk, but also between Godwin, Howard, Evans, the running back, the rest of the team. It's not a bunch of players from different spots all put together. There's chemistry where chemistry needs to be. I think that's going to be a big, big piece of this offense this coming season. So overall, are the Bucs last year's Browns? No. The Bucs are going to have a much better season this year than the Browns did this past season. You can take that to the bank. And I don't know if you guys were tuning into the match, which was the golf game where I believe Tiger Woods was matched up with Peyton Manning, and it was them two against Phil Mickelson and Tom Brady. It was a really fun thing to watch. It did get rainy at one point. I think one thing that helped it, which made it really perfect, was one, Peyton's trash talk, and two was the fact that Brady really sucked for the majority of it. In the first 9 holes, Brady was really just terrible. He couldn't seem to hit a ball onto the fairway off the drive if he had a gun to his head. But eventually, he kind of turned it around and he hit that highlight shot, and I'll include it into this into the video, into the YouTube portion of this podcast. But he hit the, I think it was over 100 yards out, and he hit it from the fairway, and it got it right into the hole. It was just really fun to watch. It was a classic match, and there was a lot of trash talk back and forth. And I think that ultimately it was just really fun to watch, and I think it was a really good thing to have for this NFL offseason to kind of help NFL fans cope with this, and just to give us something to watch, for me at least. It was the only time I've ever been excited to watch golf, and part of that was who was playing it, but also just the fact that it felt like, I was watching a competitive thing once again. I haven't really watched anything competitive in the last 3 months, so it was fun to see something like that. So the next thing I want to talk about today, it's the off season. So there's not a ton of super big topics to go off of news-wise, but something I'm going to be looking into more to provide more content is player and coach analysis. So kind of to segue into that, today I'm kind of going to do a brief version of it, and I'm going to go through a lot of the top quarterbacks and kind of look at and especially rookie quarterbacks, and look at what they're good at, what they're bad at, how high I think they can reach, where their ceiling is, where they are right now, where I think they'll end up a season from now. But here I'm just going to be ranking the best quarterbacks in the league, as well as kind of creating my own God quarterback. So I'll start out with that. So in terms of a God quarterback, you kind of have to split it up into categories. You have your intelligence and clutchness. You have your heart, You have your playmaking ability, you have your legs, you have your throwing, you have your toughness, and you have your leadership. So right away, intelligence and clutchness, I had to give to Brady. There's just so much that goes into that. He's been clutch. In every Super Bowl he's won, he has had to make a fourth quarter drive to take the lead. More often than not, it's been in the final few minutes, if not the final few seconds. I mean, you look towards the 28-3 Super Bowl, you look at the Seahawks Super Bowl, you look at the two where he had to drive the team into field goal range in the last minute, like against the Panthers and against the Rams back in the day, back in the early 2000s when they went 3 out of 4 years, won the Super Bowl. So the clutchness goes to Brady, but also the intelligence does too. And the reason for that is Brady is arguably the most intelligent quarterback out there, or at least he applies his intelligence. If you watch the Patriots football games, you'll see time and time again Brady making small adjustments out on the field, whether he's telling a receiver, hey, go that way, or he's telling his right guard, hey, there's a blitz coming through this gap, block that, or he's telling his running back, like, hey, split out wide. That's why you see the Patriots motion so much. Brady calls a lot of audibles. Whenever you hear him say alert, alert, and he taps the sides of his helmet, which he does quite often, that means he is switching to the next play. It's kind of audibling the play. So for Brady, the intelligence is definitely in his hands. He hasn't always been the most skillful quarterback, and that's why I didn't give him the throwing. That's why I didn't give him the legs or the playmaking ability. He does the majority of his magic before the snap. He reads the defense, knows what's going to be open, and looks for it. If it's not open, he throws it in the dirt. And that's what Brady's best at, intelligence and clutchness. And then you move on to heart, and I got to give that one to Aaron Rodgers. My reasoning behind that is that Aaron Rodgers is the type of player that will not give up on a game. Now, I'm not saying Brady would give up on a game, but if based on history, you kind of had to look at, all right, what quarterback, even, when they're down a bunch with like 14 seconds left, need to throw a Hail Mary, Rodgers has got to win that. I think he has the best heart out of all the quarterbacks. I think, honestly, you could argue Brady has the best heart. You could argue Breeze has the best heart. But I had to give that one to Rodgers. I didn't want Brady to have half the quarterback. So then you move on to playmaking ability. I had to give that one to Patrick Mahomes. We've seen it these last 2 seasons. When a play looks dead, he will run around, maneuver around people, and then sidearm, no-look, pass it to Tyreek Hill across the middle. He will just find a way to turn a play that looks like nothing into something amazing. He does it time and time again, so that's why I had to give playmaking ability to Patrick Mahomes. Then you go to the legs. I think this one's pretty obvious. Lamar Jackson. He's easily got the best elusiveness out of any quarterback. Josh Allen could argue, but Josh Allen still doesn't come anywhere near Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson's got over 2,000 rushing yards in his first 2 NFL seasons. He is a machine in terms of scrambling and design quarterback runs. In terms of throwing the ball, I had to give it to Drew Brees. I believe Drew Brees is the most accurate quarterback in the league. Now, some Patriots fans might argue, oh, well, Brady's super accurate. He just throws the ball away a lot, and he spikes the ball a lot, and a lot of times his receivers aren't open, or they just drop it. Yes, that's fair, but just based off of the pure, all right, what's his completion percentage? You have to give it to Brees. You really do. And maybe this year when he's on the Buccaneers and he has great receivers, we'll see it turn around and he might have a 70% completion percentage. If that happens, I might give throwing to Brady. But until then, Brees has it right now in terms of today. Toughness, Big Ben. Big Ben, I believe, is one of the most underrated quarterbacks in the league. Granted, last year, the one game he played in, he played really bad and then ultimately got injured the next week. But I think Big Ben is a really underrated quarterback. He's really tough. He breaks tackles. That's why they call him Big Ben. He breaks sacks, and he can throw the ball really well. He's an overall pretty good quarterback, but in terms of toughness, Big Ben is definitely the best in the league in toughness. And then finally, we come to leadership. And I think this is something overlooked with a quarterback that arguably is the most underrated quarterback in the league, Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson is a great quarterback. He has great playmaking ability. He has great legs. He has great throwing. He has really good intelligence. I don't think he beats out Mahomes, Jackson, or Brady on those things. But if there's anything Russell Wilson deserves, it's leadership. You see it on the sidelines. You see it in the mic'd up. Wilson always stays calm. He never lets his emotions overtake him. You even saw it in the Super Bowl where he threw the interception. Granted, that wasn't very clutch of him. But even when it happened, you see he could control himself. He didn't fall to his knees and start crying. He kind of walked off the field, clapped his hands, and was like, dang, I shouldn't have done that. But he didn't let his emotions overtake him. And honestly, that and all the mic'd up moments I've watched of Russell Wilson, I've never seen emotion kind of take over the way he talks to his teammates, take over the way he talks to his coaches. He always seems composed. And again, arguably, Brady could also have that. But the thing about Brady is I've seen him get very angry at his teammates. And that can both be a leadership quality and a bad part of leadership, just depending on the players that are on your team. So in terms of any player ever, Russell Wilson is definitely the leadership. So here now I'm going to rank the quarterbacks. Those 6 quarterbacks that I used, I'm going to rank them in overall quarterback and overall skill, as well as a third thing that I'll explain later. But first, we're going to look at overall skill. This means athleticism. Number 1 is Lamar Jackson. Easy. He's got the legs, and he's got a pretty good arm. His arm isn't bad, and he just has pure athleticism as a dual-threat quarterback. Second comes Patrick Mahomes. We've seen it. He can scramble. He can pass deep. He can pass short. He can no-look pass it, sidearm, anything you want. He even said he could throw it behind his back. He is the second best quarterback in terms of athleticism. Third comes Aaron Rodgers. Despite his age, he still shows that same athleticism, being able to kind of move around the pocket, really evade defenders, really evade the defense, and throw the defense off in order to make a play happen. Fourth on that list comes Russell Wilson. Again, an overlooked quarterback. He's got the wheels. He's not super fast, but he always finds a way to get away from the pressure and make a nice throw. Fifth comes Brady. My reason for that in terms of athleticism is his throwing accuracy. Whenever he has a receiver open by a little bit, much more often than not, say 9 out of 10 times, he is going to dart that thing in perfect spiral right into the chest. And then last on that list comes Drew Brees. Just because I understand he's got okay legs, he's got okay this, he's got okay that, but the point is he has okay that stuff. And his throwing accuracy is really good. But when I watch him play, I don't think it's quite on the level that Brady is when Brady has open receivers. Now, again, that might seem a little confusing considering I gave Brees the throwing part of the quarterback, but I had to give Brees something. And then in terms of overall quarterback, ranking those 6 guys, so in terms of if I was a general manager and I wanted a quarterback that I believe I could build a dynasty with, all these quarterbacks, of course, in their prime, number 1 is Brady. Easy. Brady will do the job. He'll get the job done. If you need a drive here, he'll get the drive done. He'll do what he needs to do, and he has a great work ethic, and he puts on a great role model type example to the rest of the team. So it's a great leader, a great quarterback to have on your team if you're just starting out. Second comes Patrick Mahomes. He's also a really good leader. He has great athleticism, like I said, and he's got great playmaking ability, meaning, especially considering that you're just starting out, if you got some of these young guys that aren't that great, Mahomes can kind of make up for it. Third comes Russell Wilson. Again, overlooked. I think Wilson is better than Brees overall if you count athleticism, clutchness, intelligence, throwing, heart, leadership, everything. I believe Wilson is above Brees. And then following Wilson, of course, is Drew Brees. And then following Drew Brees comes Aaron Rodgers, who I believe is an amazing quarterback. And in his prime, he was definitely top 5 quarterbacks in the league right now that I would want on my team. And last out of those 6 comes Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson is great, but the one thing that kind of caused me to put him down at 6 is the risk factor. He runs it a lot. So first off, your team needs to be a run-first team, which sometimes is kind of hard to achieve because, one, running backs are asking for a lot of money right now. And 2, you need to have a pretty good offensive line, which is hard to get. And you also run the risk of Lamar Jackson being injured. So there's just the longevity factor that's kind of scary in Lamar Jackson. So that's the only reason I put him down there. So then we move to the rookies, and I'll end the episode off on this. I won't go too far in explaining, so I'm kind of running out of time here. But in terms of overall ceiling, number 1, Joe Burrow, obviously. Number 2, Lamar Jackson. Number 3, Patrick Mahomes. Number 4, Kyler Murray. Number 5, Josh Allen. And number 6, Daniel Jones. And I believe the 3 worst quarterbacks in the league are Sam Darnold, Phillip Rivers, and Dwayne Haskins. And every quarterback you heard in there will probably my next few episodes are going to be quarterback analysis. Meaning I'll come in here, watch the film, and tell you what I see, tell you what I think about the quarterback. So you'll hear about those 6 quarterbacks and the other rookies I mentioned. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.